The training room was empty except for the projector humming softly in the corner, and Penelope Edwards wondered if she had gotten the date wrong again as she glanced at her watch, showing 8:55 in the morning. She smoothed down her navy blazer and adjusted the materials on the table, reminding herself that this was the third consecutive month she had been conducting leadership workshops for this particular manufacturing company, and the attendees always trickled in at the last possible second. The company specialized in premium outdoor furniture, the kind that graced the patios of expensive homes and luxury resorts, and their employee retention had reportedly improved significantly since these monthly sessions began. The door swung open, and a group of supervisors and team leaders filed in, carrying coffee cups and notebooks. Penelope recognized most of their faces now, though she made it a point to learn something new about each person during every session. She believed that training was not just about imparting knowledge, but about understanding the people she was teaching, about connecting with them in ways that made the lesson stick. "Good morning, everyone," she said warmly as the room settled. "I hope you are all ready to dive into conflict resolution strategies today." A woman named Sandra, who managed the assembly line, raised her hand. "Before we start, I just wanted to say that the communication techniques you taught us last month have been incredible. My team has been so much more cohesive." Penelope felt the familiar warmth that came with knowing her work mattered. "That is wonderful to hear, Sandra. Today we are going to build on those skills." What Penelope did not know was that 3 floors above, in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the production facility, the owner of the company was reviewing quarterly reports that showed a remarkable turnaround in productivity and employee satisfaction. Yates Zimmerman had inherited the business from his father 5 years ago, and the transition had been rocky. At 32, he had proven himself capable of maintaining the company's financial success, but the human element had always eluded him. He was analytical, driven, and admittedly not the best at interpersonal relationships. His assistant, Marion, had suggested bringing in a training consultant about 4 months ago, and Yates had agreed without much thought, delegating the entire arrangement to his human resources director. He signed the checks, saw the results in the data, but had never bothered to attend a session or even learn the name of the person responsible for the transformation. "The numbers do not lie," he murmured to himself, studying a graph that showed a 15% increase in productivity and a 20% decrease in staff turnover. "Whatever we are doing, it is working." He made a mental note to ask HR about renewing the consultant's contract indefinitely, then returned to his stack of supplier agreements and financial projections. Meanwhile, in the training room, Penelope was guiding the group through a role-playing exercise. She had paired people up and given them scenarios involving difficult conversations with employees or colleagues. The room buzzed with awkward laughter and genuine attempts at applying the framework she had introduced. "Remember," she called out over the noise, "the goal is not to win the argument but to find a solution that respects everyone involved." After the session ended at noon, several people lingered to ask questions or share stories about how previous lessons had helped them. Penelope always made time for these conversations, believing they were just as important as the formal training. By the time she packed up her materials and left the building, it was nearly 1 in the afternoon. As she walked to her car, she passed by the main office building but thought nothing of it. She had no reason to believe that the owner of the company even knew who she was, and honestly, it did not matter to her. She was not in this work for recognition or praise from executives. She did it because she genuinely loved helping people become better versions of themselves in their professional lives. Penelope had stumbled into corporate training almost by accident. She had studied psychology in college with dreams of becoming a therapist. But during an internship, she discovered that she had a knack for teaching adults in workplace settings. There was something deeply satisfying about watching someone have a breakthrough moment, about seeing a struggling manager suddenly understand how to motivate their team or resolve a conflict. She had started her own consulting business 3 years ago, and it had grown steadily through word of mouth and genuine results. The weeks passed, and Penelope returned to the manufacturing company for her next monthly session. This time, she focused on time management and delegation skills. The same familiar faces greeted her, along with a few new ones from different departments. She learned that word about the training sessions had spread, and more people were requesting to attend. Yates Zimmerman, meanwhile, was dealing with a crisis involving a major client who was threatening to take their business elsewhere due to delayed shipments. He spent the entire day in emergency meetings with his operations team, his sales director, and his logistics coordinator. By the end of the day, they had crafted a solution that involved restructuring their production schedule and offering the client a discount on their next order. As everyone filed out of the conference room, his operations manager, a man named Gregory, paused at the door. "You know, the skills I learned in those monthly training sessions really helped today. I was able to keep my team calm and focused even when things got tense." Yates looked up from his notes. "The training sessions? Yeah, the ones we have been doing for the past few months. The consultant who comes in, she is fantastic." "Right," Yates said, though he realized he still had no clear picture of what actually happened in those sessions. "Glad they are paying off." After Gregory left, Yates sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes. He was exhausted, but relieved that they had averted a major disaster. It occurred to him that he should probably know more about this training program that everyone kept mentioning, but there were always more pressing matters demanding his attention. The following week, Penelope was at a different client's office, conducting a workshop on leadership presence for a boutique hotel chain. She loved the variety her work provided, the chance to interact with different industries and personalities. But she found herself looking forward to her monthly visits to the furniture manufacturing company. There was something special about that group, a genuine eagerness to learn and improve that made her job easier and more rewarding. Her best friend, Claudia, often teased her about being too invested in her work. They met for dinner one evening at their favorite Italian restaurant, and Claudia brought it up again. "You need to date more," Claudia said, twirling pasta around her fork. "When was the last time you went out with someone?" Penelope laughed. "I went on that coffee date 2 months ago. Exactly, 2 months ago, and you said it was boring." "It was not boring, he was nice. We just did not have chemistry," Claudia shook her head. "You are 29 years old and gorgeous. You should be out there meeting people, not spending every evening preparing training materials." "I like preparing training materials," Penelope said, but she knew Claudia had a point. She had been so focused on building her business that her personal life had taken a backseat. "Besides, I am not opposed to meeting someone. It just has not happened yet." "It will not happen if you do not put yourself out there," Claudia said. "Promise me you will at least consider trying one of those dating apps." Penelope groaned but agreed to think about it, knowing full well that she probably would not follow through. She had tried online dating before and found it exhausting and artificial. She preferred the idea of meeting someone organically, though she had no idea when or where that might happen given her current lifestyle. The next month, As Penelope prepared for her session at the manufacturing company, she decided to try something different. Instead of a structured workshop, she wanted to facilitate an open discussion about workplace challenges. She believed that sometimes the best learning came from shared experiences and collective problem solving. When she arrived at the training room, she found it more crowded than usual. Apparently, the sessions had become so popular that people from departments she had not even worked with were attending. "We might need a bigger room next time," Sandra joked as people squeezed into chairs. Penelope smiled. "I love the enthusiasm. Okay, everyone, today is going to be different. I want to hear from you. What are the biggest challenges you are facing right now in your roles?" Hands shot up around the room, and for the next 3 hours, Penelope facilitated one of the most dynamic and productive conversations she had ever experienced in her career. People shared frustrations, offered solutions, debated approaches, and ultimately came together in ways that surprised even her. She guided the discussion, offered frameworks and tools when appropriate, but mostly she let the group lead themselves. When the session ended, people were still talking in clusters, exchanging contact information and promising to follow up on ideas that had emerged. Penelope felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she packed up. This was why she did this work. What she did not see was Yates Zimmerman standing just outside the training room, having finally decided to observe one of these sessions after hearing countless employees praise them. He had arrived late, caught in another meeting, and had quietly opened the door to peek inside during the last 15 minutes. He had been struck by the energy in the room, by the way people were engaged and animated. And he had noticed the woman at the front, her presence somehow both commanding and approachable, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her smile genuine as she listened intently to someone's story. He had not stayed long, not wanting to disrupt the session, but he had seen enough to understand why the training was making such a difference. There was something about her, about the way she connected with people, that was clearly special. Back in his office, Yates found himself distracted, thinking about what he had witnessed. He called Marion in. "The training consultant," he said. "What is her name?" Marion looked surprised by the question. "Penelope Edwards. She runs her own consulting firm." "Why?" "Just curious. I sat in on part of today's session. She is very good at what she does." "Everyone loves her," Marion said. "We have been getting requests from almost every department to attend her sessions." Yates nodded slowly. "Make sure we keep her contract active. And see if we can book her for additional sessions if she has availability." "Will do," Marion said, making notes. After she left, Yates returned to his work, but his mind kept wandering back to the training room, to the woman with the warm smile and the clear passion for what she did. He told himself he was simply appreciating a valuable business asset, but there was something else nagging at him, something he could not quite name. The following month, Yates made a point of attending the training session from the beginning. He slipped into the back of the room just as Penelope was starting, and he watched as she welcomed everyone and introduced the topic of the day, which was building resilient teams. Penelope noticed a new face in the back row, a tall man with dark hair and an expensive suit that seemed out of place among the casual attire of the other attendees. She made eye contact with him briefly and offered a welcoming smile before launching into her opening remarks. Yates found himself completely absorbed in the session. Penelope was a natural teacher, weaving together research, anecdotes, and practical exercises in a way that kept everyone engaged. She had a gift for making complex concepts accessible, and she clearly cared about the people in the room. He noticed how she remembered details about individuals, referring back to things people had shared in previous sessions, creating a sense of continuity and community. When she divided the room into small groups for an activity, Penelope made her way around to each one, offering guidance and asking questions. When she reached Yates, she crouched down beside his chair. "I do not think we have met," she said quietly so as not to disturb the others. "I am Penelope. Are you new to the team?" Up close, Yates was struck by her eyes, a warm brown that seemed to see right through him. "Actually, I am Yates Zimmerman. I own the company." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I apologize. I should have introduced myself when you came in." "No, I am the one who should apologize for never attending before. This is incredible work you are doing." Penelope felt a flutter in her chest that caught her off guard. There was something about the intensity of his gaze, the genuine appreciation in his voice that affected her. "Thank you. Your team makes it easy. They are wonderful to work with." She moved on to the next group, but she found herself hyper-aware of his presence for the rest of the session. It was unusual for her to be nervous during a training, but knowing the owner was watching added a layer of pressure she had not expected. More than that, though, she found herself wanting to impress him, which was a feeling she did not quite understand. After the session ended, several people approached Yates to chat, clearly surprised to see him there. He spoke with them warmly, asking about their experiences with the training and listening to their feedback. Penelope busied herself with packing up, trying not to obviously watch him interact with his employees. Eventually, the room cleared out, and it was just the two of them. Yates approached her as she was wrapping up the projector cord. "You have a few minutes to talk?" he asked. "Of course," Penelope said, her heart beating a little faster for reasons she did not want to examine. They sat down at the table and Yates leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "I want to be honest with you. I have been a terrible client in many ways. I approved this training program months ago but never bothered to attend a session or even learn who was running it. That was wrong of me, and I apologize." Penelope was taken aback by his candor. "You do not need to apologize. You are busy running a company. That is not an excuse for not recognizing good work when it is happening right under my nose. You have made a real difference here, and I want you to know that it has not gone unnoticed, even if I was late to notice it myself." "Thank you," Penelope said softly. "That means a lot." They talked for another 20 minutes about the program, about what was working and what could be improved. Yates asked thoughtful questions, and Penelope found herself appreciating his intelligence and genuine interest. He was not just making small talk or going through the motions. He actually cared about understanding. As they stood to leave, Yates hesitated. "Would you be interested in having coffee sometime? I would love to hear more about your approach to training and development." Penelope felt that flutter again. She told herself it was a professional meeting, nothing more. "I would like that." They exchanged phone numbers, and as Penelope drove home that afternoon, she found herself smiling for no particular reason. Or rather, for a very particular reason that she was not ready to admit yet. They met for coffee 3 days later at a small cafe near Penelope's office. Yates arrived first and selected a quiet table in the corner. When Penelope walked in, wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater that made her look softer and more approachable than she did in her professional attire, he stood up and waved her over. "I hope I did not keep you waiting," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Not at all. I just got here." They ordered their drinks, and for a while they did talk about work, but gradually the conversation drifted into more personal territory. Penelope learned that Yates had never planned to take over the family business, that he had actually studied architecture in college and had dreams of designing buildings. But when his father had a stroke 5 years ago, he had stepped in to help and had never left. "You regret it?" Penelope asked, Yates considered the question. Sometimes, but I have also learned that there is satisfaction in this work that I did not expect, building something, maintaining a legacy, providing jobs for people. It matters. It does, Penelope agreed. And from what I have seen, you are good at it. I am good at the numbers and the strategy, Yates said, but the people side of things has always been harder for me. I think that is why your training has been so valuable. You are filling a gap that I cannot fill myself. Penelope told him about her journey into corporate training, about her initial dreams of being a therapist, and how she had found her calling somewhat by accident. I love what I do because I get to see people transform. Not in dramatic ways necessarily, but in small, meaningful ways. A manager who learns to really listen to their team. A supervisor who figures out how to give constructive feedback without crushing someone's confidence. Those moments matter. They do, Yates said, and the way he looked at her made Penelope's breath catch. They talked for over 2 hours, long after their coffee cups were empty. When they finally left the cafe, Yates walked her to her car. "This was really nice," he said. "I hope we can do it again." "I would like that," Penelope said, and she meant it. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern of meeting for coffee or lunch every few days. Yates found himself looking forward to these meetings more than anything else in his week. Penelope was easy to talk to, intelligent and funny in ways that surprised him. She challenged his thinking without being confrontational, and she seemed genuinely interested in his perspective on things. For Penelope, spending time with Yates was becoming the highlight of her days. She loved how seriously he took his responsibilities, how much he cared about doing right by his employees even when he struggled with the interpersonal aspects. She loved his dry sense of humor and the way his whole face changed when he smiled, which was more often now than when they had first started meeting. Claudia noticed the change in her friend immediately. "You are glowing," she said when they met for their regular dinner. "What is going on?" Penelope tried to downplay it. "Nothing, I am just happy." "This is about a man," Claudia said, pointing her fork accusingly. "You met someone." "Maybe," Penelope admitted, unable to hide her smile. "Tell me everything." Penelope described Yates, how they had met, how easy it was to be around him. "But it is complicated," she said. "He is technically a client. Is there a policy against dating clients?" "No, but it feels weird, like there is a power imbalance or something." Claudia shook her head. "You are a consultant, not his employee. And from what you are telling me, he is clearly into you. Do not overthink this." But overthinking was exactly what Penelope did. She worried that pursuing something with Yates would complicate her professional relationship with his company. She worried that she was misreading his interest, that maybe he just valued her as a colleague. She worried about a dozen different things, even as she continued to meet him for coffee, and found herself thinking about him constantly. Yates was having his own internal struggle. He had not been in a serious relationship in over 3 years, having poured all his energy into the company. He had dated casually, but never found anyone who understood the demands of his life, or who interested him enough to make the effort worthwhile. Penelope was different. She got it. She understood what it meant to be passionate about your work while also recognizing its limitations. And she made him want to be better, not just at his job but as a person. One evening, after a particularly long meeting about a potential expansion, Yates called Penelope on impulse. "Hey," he said when she answered. "Are you busy? Just finishing up some work. What is up? Do you want to grab dinner? I know it is last minute." There was a pause, and Yates worried he had overstepped. Then Penelope said, "Yes, I would love to." They met at a small bistro that Yates loved, tucked away in a neighborhood Penelope had never explored. The atmosphere was intimate, with dim lighting and jazz playing softly in the background. As they settled into their booth, Penelope realized this felt different from their coffee meetings. This felt like a date. Yates must have realized it too because he seemed slightly nervous, something Penelope had never seen from him before. "I have been wanting to do this for a while," he admitted, "but I was not sure if you would be interested." "I am interested," Penelope said, meeting his eyes across the table. The relief on his face was palpable. "Good. That is really good." They ordered food and wine, and the conversation flowed as easily as it always did between them. But there was a new undercurrent now, an acknowledgement of what was developing between them. When Yates reached across the table and took her hand, Penelope felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the wine. "I really like you," Yates said simply. "I know it is complicated with the work situation, but I cannot keep pretending this is just professional networking." "I really like you too," Penelope said. "And I have been overthinking the work thing. You are right. It is complicated, but it does not have to be impossible." They decided to take things slow, to see where this could go without rushing. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that what they had was special. Yates was attentive and thoughtful, remembering little details about Penelope's life and surprising her with gestures that showed he was paying attention. He brought her favorite tea when she mentioned she was coming down with a cold. He rearranged his schedule to attend a presentation she was giving at an industry conference. He made her feel seen in ways she had not experienced before. Penelope, in turn, brought a lightness to Yates's life that had been missing. She encouraged him to take breaks, to remember that life existed outside of work. She introduced him to her friends, including Claudia, who immediately approved. She made him laugh and reminded him what it felt like to be excited about something beyond quarterly profits and production schedules. The monthly training sessions continued, and now they had an added layer of sweetness for both of them. Penelope loved knowing that Yates was in the building, even if he did not always attend the sessions. Yates loved having her there, seeing the positive impact she had on his employees, feeling proud that this incredible woman was part of his life. About 5 months into their relationship, Yates invited Penelope to meet his parents. His father had recovered well from his stroke and was enjoying retirement, though he still kept a close eye on the company. His mother was a warm, gracious woman who welcomed Penelope with open arms. Over dinner at their home, Yates's father asked Penelope about her work. When she described her approach to corporate training, he nodded approvingly. "Yates mentioned that you are the one who has been doing the monthly sessions at the company," he said. "I have heard nothing but good things." "Thank you," Penelope said. "It has been a pleasure working with the team." Yates's mother, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward with a knowing smile. "And is that how you two met, through work?" Yates and Penelope exchanged glances. "Yes," Yates said, "though I was embarrassingly late to realize how talented she was, and how wonderful." His mother reached over and squeezed Penelope's hand. "I am just glad he finally met someone who makes him happy. We had almost given up hope." "Mom," Yates protested, but he was smiling. The evening was a success, and as they drove back to Penelope's apartment, she felt a sense of contentment she had not felt in a long time. This was real. This was going somewhere. "Your parents are lovely," she said. "They loved you," Yates replied, though that was never in doubt. He walked her to her door, and they stood there for a moment, neither wanting the evening to end. Yates cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and tender. "I am falling in love with you," he said softly. "I need you to know that." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too." They spent more and more time together, becoming a fixture in each other's lives. Yates started attending more of Penelope's training sessions, not to hover, but because he genuinely enjoyed seeing her in her element. Penelope started spending time at the company outside of her scheduled sessions, getting to know the employees better and understanding the business more deeply. One afternoon, as Penelope was wrapping up a session on emotional intelligence in leadership, Gregory approached her with a proposition. "A few of us were talking," he said, "and we were wondering if you would be interested in developing a more comprehensive leadership program. Something longer term, maybe over the course of several months, for people we are grooming for management positions." Penelope was intrigued. "That sounds fantastic. Have you run this by Yates?" Gregory grinned. "It was actually his idea. He wanted us to approach you about it to see if you would be interested before he made it official." Penelope felt a surge of affection for Yates. He could have just told her about the idea himself, but instead, he had empowered his team to take the initiative, knowing it would mean more coming from them. It was a small thing, but it showed how much he had grown in understanding how to lead people. She agreed to develop the program, and over the next few weeks, she worked closely with Yates and his leadership team to create something truly special. It was the most ambitious project she had taken on, and she poured her heart into it. The program launched 3 months later with a cohort of 12 emerging leaders from across the company. Penelope met with them twice a week, covering everything from strategic thinking to communication skills to personal development. She watched them grow and transform, and she felt a deep sense of pride in what they were building together. Yates watched Penelope thrive, and he realized that he wanted her in his life permanently, not just as his girlfriend or as a consultant to his company, but as his partner in everything. He started thinking about how to propose, wanting it to be meaningful and special. He sought advice from his mother, who suggested he incorporate something related to Penelope's work since that was such a core part of who she was. Yates thought about it for days, and then an idea struck him. He arranged for a special session with the leadership program cohort, telling them he wanted to give them a surprise guest speaker. He coordinated with Penelope's schedule, asking her to come in on a day she was not usually there, making up an excuse about needing to discuss the program's progress. When Penelope arrived at the training room, she found it set up differently than usual. The tables were arranged in a circle, and in the center was a single chair. The cohort members were all standing around the edges of the room, smiling at her. "What is going on?" she asked, confused. Yates stepped forward from where he had been standing in the corner. "We wanted to honor you," he said. "These 12 people are here because of you. They are becoming better leaders because you believed in them and gave them the tools to succeed. But it is not just them. You have impacted dozens of people in this company, including me." Penelope felt her eyes welling up as Yates continued. "You walked into this company not knowing anyone, not knowing that the owner was too busy to even learn your name. But you did not do this work for recognition. You did it because you care about people, because you want to make a difference, and you have." He walked toward her, reaching into his pocket. "Penelope Edwards, you have taught me so much. You have taught me to listen better, to care more deeply, to see the people around me as individuals with hopes and dreams and challenges. But most importantly, you have taught me what it feels like to truly love someone." He got down on one knee and Penelope gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Will you marry me?" The room erupted in cheers as Penelope nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. The cohort members surrounded them, congratulating them and sharing in the joy of the moment. It was perfect. They decided to have a relatively short engagement, both of them feeling certain about their decision and eager to start their married life together. They planned a wedding for 6 months later, a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard with their closest family and friends in attendance. Penelope continued running her consulting business, but she restructured it to focus primarily on Yates's company and a few other select clients. She found that she loved being deeply embedded in the culture of the organization, watching the long-term impact of her work. She and Yates made a powerful team, combining his strategic vision with her people skills to take the company to new heights. A year after their wedding, they bought a house together, a charming craftsman-style home with a big backyard and plenty of space for the future they were building. They talked about having children someday, but they were in no rush, content to enjoy this phase of their life together. The leadership program Penelope had developed became a cornerstone of the company's culture. Graduates of the program moved into management positions and brought with them the values and skills they had learned. Employee satisfaction continued to climb, and the company's reputation as a great place to work attracted top talent. On their second anniversary, Yates surprised Penelope with a gift. It was a plaque that read, "In honor of Penelope Zimmerman, whose vision, compassion, and dedication have transformed our company and the lives of everyone in it. I am having this mounted in the lobby," Yates said, "so that everyone who walks into this building knows the impact you have had." Penelope was moved beyond words. She had never sought recognition, but having it acknowledged meant more than she could express. "Thank you," she whispered, holding him close. As they stood there together, Penelope thought back to that first training session, when she had walked into an empty room with no idea that her life was about to change. She thought about how Yates had been just a signature on her contract, a distant figure she never expected to meet, let alone fall in love with. Life had a funny way of working out, she reflected. Sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person you were meant to be with was right there all along. You just had not met them yet. 3 years into their marriage, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news came as both a surprise and a joy. She and Yates had been talking about starting a family, but they had not been actively trying, so when the test came back positive, she sat in the bathroom for several minutes, processing the information. She told Yates that evening over dinner. She had planned something elaborate, but in the end, she just blurted it out as they were eating pasta at their kitchen table. "I am pregnant." Yates froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine that Penelope started laughing through her tears. He jumped up from his chair and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around carefully. "We are having a baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We are having a baby," Penelope confirmed. The pregnancy was relatively smooth, though Penelope experienced fatigue that made her scale back her training sessions somewhat. Yates was attentive and protective, driving her to every doctor's appointment and reading every parenting book he could find. He transformed one of their spare bedrooms into a nursery, spending weekends painting walls and assembling furniture. The employees at the company were thrilled by the news. Penelope had become beloved in the organization, and people threw her a baby shower in the training room where she had spent so many hours over the years. It was touching to see how many lives she had touched, how many people considered her not just a trainer but a friend and mentor. Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in May. They named her Violet, and from the moment Yates held her in his arms, Penelope knew that their little family was complete. Watching this strong, capable man become gentle and tender with their tiny daughter was one of the most beautiful things Penelope had ever experienced. Penelope took several months off from work to be with Violet, but she found that she missed the training sessions. When Violet was 4 months old, she started gradually returning to work, bringing the baby with her sometimes. The employees loved having a baby in the building, and Violet became something of a mascot, passed around during breaks and cooed over by everyone. As Violet grew from a baby into a toddler, Penelope and Yates found their rhythm as parents. They shared responsibilities, taking turns with nighttime wakings and early mornings. Yates proved to be a wonderful father, patient and involved in ways that made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. The company continued to thrive. Yates and Penelope had become true partners in every sense, both in their personal life and in their professional endeavors. They made decisions together, supported each other's goals, and built something that went beyond just a successful business. They had created a culture of respect, growth, and genuine care for people. When Violet was 3 years old, Penelope launched a new initiative at the company, a mentorship program that paired experienced employees with newer hires. It was an extension of the training work she had been doing, but it created ongoing relationships that lasted beyond a single workshop or program. The results were remarkable, with new employees reporting higher job satisfaction and faster integration into the company culture. Yates watched Penelope present the program results to the board of directors, and he felt a swell of pride. This woman, his wife, had walked into his company as a stranger and had become integral to everything they had achieved. She had transformed not just the business but his entire life. That evening, after they had put Violet to bed, they sat together on the back porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight. Penelope leaned against Yates, his arm around her shoulders. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "If I had not taken the contract with your company, if you had never attended one of my sessions, all the time," Yates admitted. "And it terrifies me. I almost missed this. I almost missed you." "But you did not," Penelope said. "We found each other." "We did," Yates agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." They talked about their dreams for the future. Yates wanted to expand the company's product line, perhaps venture into commercial furniture for offices and public spaces. Penelope wanted to write a book about her training philosophy, to share what she had learned with a broader audience. They talked about maybe having another child in a few years, about traveling more as a family, about all the adventures that still awaited them. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had started out wanting to help people, to make a difference in small ways. She had never imagined that her work would lead her to the love of her life, to a family, to a sense of belonging and purpose that filled her completely. The next morning, Penelope woke early and went for a run, something she had recently started doing again. As she jogged through their neighborhood, she reflected on how lucky she was. Not just lucky, she corrected herself. Blessed. She had worked hard, yes, and she had made good choices. But she had also been in the right place at the right time, had been open to possibilities she had not anticipated. When she returned home, Yates was in the kitchen making breakfast while Violet sat at the table, coloring in a princess coloring book. The scene was so perfectly ordinary and yet so precious that Penelope paused in the doorway to take it in. Yates looked up and smiled at her. "Good run." "Great run," Penelope said, walking over to kiss him. She ruffled Violet's hair, making their daughter giggle. "What are we doing today?" "I thought we could go to the farmer's market," Yates suggested. "And maybe the park after." "That sounds perfect," Penelope said, and it was perfect. All of it. The simple Saturday morning routines, the breakfast together, the walk to the farmer's market where they bought fresh vegetables and flowers. The afternoon at the park where Violet played on the swings and they spread out a blanket for a picnic. The evening at home, cooking dinner together while Violet helped by stirring a bowl and making a mess. These were the moments that mattered, Penelope realized. Not the big dramatic gestures or the major milestones, though those were important too, but the everyday moments of connection, of love expressed in mundane tasks and shared rituals. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, back when she was just starting her business and throwing herself into work because she had not yet found her person. 5 years after Violet was born, Penelope and Yates welcomed a son they named Peter. The family felt complete with 4 of them, and their house was filled with the beautiful chaos of young children, scattered toys, and constant laughter. Yates had stepped back slightly from the day-to-day operations of the company, promoting trusted leaders who had come through Penelope's training programs to take on more responsibility. This gave him more time to be present for his family, which was exactly what he wanted. Penelope published her book, Training with Heart, a human-centered approach to professional development, and it was well received in her field. She was invited to speak at conferences and consult with organizations around the country. But she always made sure these commitments did not take her away from her family for too long. She had learned to set boundaries, to protect the life she and Yates had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the vineyard where they had gotten married. Yates's parents watched the children for the weekend, and they had 2 blissful days of just being together, remembering who they were as a couple before they became parents. Over a candlelit dinner on their last evening, Yates raised his glass. To 10 years of the best decision I ever made. Penelope clinked her glass against his. To many more. You remember that coffee meeting? Yates asked. Our first one where I asked you about your training approach and we ended up talking for hours. I remember thinking you were the most interesting person I had met in a long time, Penelope said. And I remember being nervous, which was unusual for me. I was nervous too, Yates admitted. I knew even then that you were someone special. I just did not know how special yet. I never imagined when I started those training sessions that they would lead to this, Penelope said. To us, to our family, to this whole life. Best training outcome ever, Yates said with a grin, and Penelope laughed. They reminisced about their journey, about the early days of uncertainty and the gradual realization that what they had was real and lasting. They talked about how they had grown together, how they had learned to navigate challenges and celebrate victories as a team. They acknowledged that life had not always been easy, that there had been difficult moments and disagreements, but that their commitment to each other had seen them through. As they drove home the next day to pick up their children, Penelope felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned, but it had turned out better than she could have dreamed. She had her work, which continued to fulfill her and make a difference. She had her family, which was her greatest joy. And she had Yates, her partner and best friend, who loved her completely and whom she loved with all her heart. The children were excited to see them when they arrived at Yates's parents' house. Violet, now a confident 10-year-old, chattered about everything they had done over the weekend. Peter, at 5, was more reserved but equally happy, clutching his grandfather's hand as he shyly showed them a picture he had drawn. They loaded the kids into the car amid hugs and thanks to the grandparents, and as they drove home, Penelope looked back at her children in the rearview mirror and then over at Yates, who was focused on the road but reached over to take her hand. This was her life. This was her family. And it had all started with a training session, with a decision to help people become better at their jobs, with a willingness to connect with others and make a difference. She had walked into that company not knowing anyone, and she had walked out with everything she had ever wanted. Years continued to pass in a blur of school events, family vacations, birthday parties, and quiet evenings at home. Violet grew into a thoughtful teenager with her mother's compassion and her father's analytical mind. Peter was creative and adventurous, always building something or exploring the backyard. Yates and Penelope watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness of how quickly time was passing. The company that had brought them together continued to evolve. Under Yates's leadership, and with Penelope's influence on its culture, it had become known not just for quality products, but for being an exceptional place to work. They had expanded into new markets, hired hundreds of employees, and maintained the values that had always been important to them. Penelope's training programs had become legendary in the industry. Companies reached out constantly asking her to replicate what she had built. And while she took on some of these projects, she was selective, choosing organizations that genuinely wanted to invest in their people rather than just checking a box. One day, as Penelope was conducting a session for a new group of emerging leaders at the company, she paused in the middle of explaining a concept and looked around the room. These faces, so engaged and eager to learn, reminded her of why she had fallen in love with this work in the first place. Each person represented potential, possibility, a chance to make a positive impact that would ripple outward in ways she might never fully know. After the session, she walked through the production facility, something she liked to do occasionally to stay connected to the heart of the business. She stopped to chat with employees, many of whom she had trained over the years. They updated her on their lives, their families, their career progress. She felt a deep connection to this place and these people. She found Yates in his office, working through paperwork but looking up with a smile when she knocked on his door. Even after all these years, her heart still fluttered when he looked at her like that, like she was the best part of his day. "Hey you," he said. "How was the session?" "Really good. This new cohort is fantastic." "They are lucky to have you," Yates said, standing and walking around his desk to pull her into his arms. "I am the lucky one," Penelope said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the office where so many important conversations and decisions had taken place over the years. This room had witnessed their professional collaboration, their personal confessions, their shared dreams and occasional disagreements. It was just an office, but it held so much of their history. "You ever regret not pursuing architecture?" Penelope asked, thinking about that conversation they had had so many years ago at the coffee shop. Yates considered the question. "Sometimes I wonder what that path would have been like. But no, I do not regret it. This life with you, with our kids, with this company and all the people in it, this is exactly where I am meant to be." "Me too," Penelope said softly. As they drove home that evening to have dinner with their teenagers, who would likely be distracted by homework and friends and all the drama of adolescence, Penelope reflected on the unexpected beauty of how life unfolds. She had set out to train a company's staff, to help people develop skills and grow in their careers. She had never imagined that in doing so, she would meet the man who would become her everything, that she would build a family and a life beyond her wildest dreams. The story of how they met had become something they told at dinner parties and family gatherings, a story that made people smile and believe in the possibility of finding love in unexpected places. But for Penelope and Yates, it was not just a story. It was their truth, their foundation, the beginning of everything that mattered. As they pulled into their driveway and prepared to enter the beautiful chaos of their home, with its scattered shoes and backpacks, and the sounds of their children arguing over something trivial, Penelope felt a wave of contentment wash over her. This was not a fairy tale with a neat ending. This was real life, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. She had trained his company's staff each month, and the millionaire had not known she was the one behind it. But then he had learned, and he had seen her, really seen her, and everything had changed. They had built a life together, a love that had weathered challenges and grown stronger with time. They had created a family, nurtured a business, and touched countless lives along the way. And as they walked hand in hand toward their front door, ready to embrace whatever the evening would bring, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that this was the happily ever after she had always been meant to have. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and it was theirs, and it was filled with love that would last forever.